After earning a split in Dallas, how do the Mavericks go to Utah and try to do the same in what will be a raucous atmosphere for games 3 and 4? This is Inside the Mavs right here on Kevin Gray Sports. My name is Kevin Gray. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Kevin Gray Sports. Be sure to hit that subscribe button right there for all things Kevin Gray Sports here on YouTube. And you can catch me on your home of the Dallas Cowboys and Texas Rangers, 105.3 The Fan. The Dallas Mavericks earned a split at the AAC after getting a 110-104 win at home over the Utah Jazz behind Jalen Brunson's 41 points, Maxi Kleber hitting a career-high 8 3-pointers, and the Dallas Mavericks hitting 22 3-pointers, a franchise record for the playoffs to earn that split as they get ready to head to Utah for games 3 and 4. The question is, will Luka Doncic finally be introduced into this series after having missed the first 2 games due to the left calf strain? Obviously, his availability can change the complexion of this series, but regardless, the Mavericks did what they had to do. They got themselves a split after dropping Game 1 to the Utah Jazz, 99-93, where defensively they played pretty well, just weren't able to execute down the stretch. They got it to within 1, but weren't able to close out the deal from there. But in game number 2, all things flipped on its head, especially with the aggressiveness of Jalen Brunson, him attacking the rim, and obviously the three-point shooting that he and the entire Mavericks team had in game number 2 was the biggest difference. Yes, they got out-rebounded again by 19 rebounds in game number 2, just like they did in game number 1. But as we talked about in our adjustments going into game 2, what they had to do was make more shots, be able to hit consistently much better from the three-point line, and be able to continue to put pressure on Utah when it came to getting out in transition when they had their opportunities, but more importantly, continue to remain aggressive in attacking the rim, and that's exactly what the Mavericks were able to do, especially with better ball movement in the second half. Now, don't get me wrong. Jalen Brunson scoring 41 points and playing the kind of aggressive basketball that he did at one point, hitting 3 straight three-pointers, including that heat check 3 that put them up 14-6, and the way that he came out and set the tone offensively is something that regardless of if Luka Doncic is on the floor, he will have to continue to do. But what the Mavericks were able to do defensively for a second straight game was 2 things. Number 1, limiting the amount of three-pointers that the Utah Jazz took in both games 1 and 2. They took only 29 three-pointers in game number 2. They are accustomed to shooting over 40 three-pointers per game, which, of course, led the NBA this year. And again, they forced Donovan Mitchell. While, yes, he got 34 points, he did it on 30 shots in game number 2. Their ability to stress Utah's defense when it comes to attacking the rim, and we know how poor the perimeter defense has been for the Utah Jazz, not just in this series, but overall in general, they have a chance to be able to continue to do that even in Utah. Now, don't get me wrong. Utah is a very difficult place to play, a place where the Dallas Mavericks have not won a game in a long time. But what they found in game number 2 was this. Obviously, making shots helps a lot, but attacking the perimeter defense of the Utah Jazz and relentlessly going to the rim and attempting to finish in the paint is something that they will have to continue to do. Because once these mid-range shots start to fall for Spencer Dinwiddie and continuing for Jalen Brunson, you are forcing the Utah Jazz to make certain decisions on how Rudy Gobert plays that drop coverage and how he will have to continue to move up into the elbow area and the free throw line to try and defend shots, which could get this team rolling when it comes from a pick-and-roll situation. Now, Dwight Powell has been rendered pretty much ineffective in this series because Dinwiddie and Brunson are not going to be the same lob threats when it comes to the passing ability that a Luka Doncic obviously has. That will change in the complexion of this series if Luka Doncic is able to play in games 3 or 4 and beyond in this series. But if you're a Mavericks fan, you could look at this situation and say that the Mavericks could be up 2-0 based on what's happened in the first 2 games of this series. The Mavericks have shown a measure of resiliency coming back from a 9-point deficit in this particular game, or a 10-point deficit, I should say, in game number 2. They nearly did the same in game number 1. The Mavericks have been right there in both games, and they were able to obviously finish it off in game number 2. But this team theoretically could be up 2-0 in this series if certain things had broken their way in game number 1. Regardless, you did what you had to do. And now you sit here on the precipice of potentially allowing Luka Doncic to get into this series sooner than later. Now, going into this series, I thought, look, he's going to miss the first couple of games. It would be the earliest that we could see him would be game number 3. If that is possible and we see him in game 3 or more likely in game 4, the Mavericks still have a real shot at this series. By earning the split in Dallas, they have to do the same in Utah. You cannot come back to the American Airlines Center down 3-1. At minimum, you have to be 2-2 going back to the American Airlines Center for Monday night's game number 5. And then all bets are off from there, because then you are to a point, if you're 2-2 coming back to your building, you've got 2 of the final 3 games at home in this series, which would bode well for the life and extension of this series to get Luka Doncic back on the floor, because if nothing else, you want to have at least the opportunity to have number 77 on the floor for a Game 7 in his own building with a chance to send his team to the second round of the Western Conference playoffs. That is the position that the Mavericks have put themselves in. They have now extended this series by at least one more game, and we know by virtue of them continuing to win more ball games, this series gets extended more and more and more, which allows time for Luka Doncic to come back and play for the Dallas Mavericks. But I love the adjustments that the Mavericks made in Game 2. Here's what Utah doesn't want to do. They don't want to get into a small ball situation when it comes to playing against the Dallas Mavericks. That's why you heard your man Quinn Snyder say after Game 1, look, if we're going to continue to out-rebound them by 19, 20 rebounds a game, they may have to reconsider going small. Well, guess what? The Dallas Mavericks got out-rebounded again by 19 at Game 2. And they went small, and they were able to work it out. That's because, hello, Maxi Kleber. Maxi Kleber showed up, and he put on an absolute show. You can call him Maxi. You can call him on 1-800-MAXI Kleber 3. You can call him whatever you want. He showed up in the big way that he needed to in Game 2. Now, I didn't think he was going to show up and hit 8 threes in a game in a playoff situation against the Utah Jazz, but here we are. Maxi Kleber's ability to stretch the floor from the three-point line is going to be massive in this series and continuing to go forward. I'm not expecting him to hit 8 threes in a game, but if he can give you 3 to 5 threes per game for the rest of this series and shoot with the kind of consistency that makes Utah have to decide how they're going to defend him, because in this game alone, in Game 2, Maxi Kleber's 7 out of the 8 threes that he hit were uncontested. They hit 17 uncontested threes altogether in game number 2. That just gives you an idea of how many wide open looks this team will continue to get, whether it be Josh Green, Dorian Finney-Smith, Maxi Kleber, Reggie Bullock. They're going to get uncontested three-point opportunities to have to try and prove to the Utah Jazz that they will continue to knock down shots at that kind of rate for the rest of this series. And if they can come close to what they did in game number 2, that could spell a lot of trouble for the Utah Jazz, because obviously the more shots that you make, the less defensive rebounding opportunities you're going to have. That is what you saw in game number 2. The Dallas Mavericks got out-rebounded by 19, but the defensive rebounds the Utah Jazz had were 39 versus the 29 that the Dallas Mavericks had. Now, they do have to clean up the offensive glass to create second chance opportunities and possessions for them, because they got killed on the offensive glass 11-2. We know that the rebounding disparity is going to remain in this series, but you've got to some way shorten that disparity somewhat, but more importantly, continue to protect the basketball the way that they did. The Dallas Mavericks in Game 2 had more steals than they did turnovers, 5-3. That just shows you how much they valued the basketball, valued the possessions, and more importantly, didn't give the Utah Jazz extra possessions to capitalize offensively. We know by offensive rating, the Utah Jazz are the best team in the NBA this year. But by limiting turnovers and creating opportunities on defense to take away the basketball, you may get out-rebounded in this series, but by limiting turnovers, creating your own, and then capitalizing when you have the opportunity to in transition while knocking down shots, you're going to give yourself a really good opportunity to win games in this series. That is before Luka Doncic even comes back. So regardless of when 77 comes, you saw a formula in game number 2 that can be possibly replicated. Again, not to the tune of 22 three-pointers made, but the ability to knock down consistently three-point shots to make the Utah Jazz defense respect you and then punish them by taking them off the dribble and be able to create more ball movement like you did in game 2, especially in the second half, to create open looks and opportunities, not just for outside shooters, but to be able to attack the rim in a way that could force guys like Rudy Gobert and Hassan Whiteside into foul trouble. That is the formula for the Mavericks. Relentlessly attack the rim over and over, and yes, get the kinds of performances, not necessarily to the degree of 41 points and 8 3-pointers when it comes to Jalen Brunson and Maxi Kleber, but similar performances in the mentality and the way that they play the game against Utah in games 3 and 4. Utah is a difficult place to play, but it's not to say they couldn't do it. And more importantly, 77 could be on his way to help the Mavericks out. I'll be covering all things for the Mavericks this week. I'll be at practice today and beyond as the Dallas Mavericks get ready to take on the Utah Jazz in games 3 and 4. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports for all of your Mavs coverage, not just for Kevin Gray Sports, but of course for 105.3 The Fan. This has been Inside the Mavs here on Kevin Gray Sports. Again, you can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Kevin Gray Sports. Hit that subscribe button right there for all things Kevin Gray Sports here on YouTube. We'll talk to you later. Peace.